Going live. Bill O'Reilly. We'll do it live. All right. Looks like we're on. Hey, this is TJ. This is the Shark Tank Hangover, episode 3. And I've got a very, very special guest. He's a Shark Tank veteran. I think he's been on Shark Tank more than anybody except for maybe the Sharks. Probably just surpassed Kevin Harrington. I gotta see what the count is. This is Dave Alwan, Echo Valley Meats, and Shark Tank Superstar. Dave, what's up, man? Welcome.
Hey, TJ. How are you, brother? Thanks for having me once again. Happy to be here.
Probably nobody could tell that it's like 1 a.m. where you live. You decided to stay hungover with me tonight, and I appreciate that. How was the show tonight? Did you enjoy it?
I did. You know what? The new guest shark tonight, I was very impressed with him, and he asked a lot of great questions and came back with some really good stuff. So I thought it was a good episode.
I'm really enjoying the guest sharks. I'm digging it a lot. I don't know if Robert's going to lose his seat, but I like it when they mix it up. When are you getting your guest shark spot? Which show?
No, never. I got too much. I don't have to. You know what? That's what they pay the big guys for. That's their role, and us entrepreneurs are just trying to survive.
So before we jump in, let's talk a little bit about Dave Alwan and Echo Valley Meats. Now, you were on originally in season 4. You didn't get a deal. Right. You went back in season 5 and got a deal. Then you got
an update on season 5, and then went back on season 6 and got a deal.
You were one of the last people to get an update. Sorry, I got that confused. Without doing a deal, and then went back in season 6 and got a deal. So that's 3 times. Are you going to just be on Shark Tank every episode until the show peters out?
Hey, you know what? I tell you what, from the show to Clay to the Sharks, absolutely, Sony, ABC, Shark Tank, everybody there's first class. So you know what? I have never had a bad experience. Obviously, I never dreamed in a million years I would go back, and I had a great experience from season 4, even without a deal. It just, it changes lives. I mean, as I said before, the power of Shark Tank is something crazy that you hear about, but when you feel it and witness it every day, you kind of feel the magnitude of how powerful the show really is.
Yeah. So for those people who maybe don't remember you, it's important for them to know that they've kind of changed the rules a little bit. Nowadays, if you don't get a deal on Shark Tank, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get an update. And you did it. And then you went back and got a deal with Mark Cuban. And I was actually at your viewing party. I have some video I need to post on YouTube. I had the time of my life. This guy, Dave Alwan, I come in, he gives me his wife's car, and then he takes me down, and I get a full facial massage and whatever else they did to me at the salon, stuff that I'd never had happen to me because I'm full on, manly man. But I enjoyed the crap out of it. It was awesome. So I still talk about that today. We went to where did we go?
Maui Gyms.
Gym plant. We met the CEO. We had a good time. That was my favorite Shark Tank day that I've had since I started doing this. So,
and people don't realize Peoria, Illinois is pretty cool, believe it or not. Caterpillar's world headquarters, Maui Gyms world headquarters. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in, Peoria, Illinois that most people would have no concept of. And as you witnessed it, I think you had a really enjoyable time. And gosh, I was so glad you were a part of it.
I did, and I learned how big Peoria must have been because I think that small airport I flew into, the private airport next to it with all the private jet hangars, I think was bigger. There was more of those than there were commercial airplanes.
It's possible. Well, I think you flew into St. Louis, if I'm not mistaken, and we had to get you a car because it was such a last minute type thing. We had some maneuvering to do for you.
Yeah. I'm not the only one either. There's a couple of us that came in, and I had to drive in, but I flew out. You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. You drove in from St. Louis, and then a couple drove in from Chicago. And I mean, it was 2 hours for you, 3 hours for them. And everybody was kind of getting to Peoria. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, I guess so. Now you staying up late tonight, I drive there like 2 a.m. from St. Louis, but it was all good. That was the trip where I left my bag on the bus.
Oh, wow.
When you get out of the terminal and you take the bus, it was like 1 a.m. and I got off. I was the only one on. I left. It was snowing outside, and I went into the car rental, got my car, got the keys, came outside, no bag. Imagine how freaked out I was. Well, the lady in the bus was parked 100 meters down the road. She was sleeping in the bus. It was hilarious. So, yeah, that was the trip of a lifetime. I had a really awesome time. It's like it was yesterday. All right, cool. So we got to talk about the show tonight. A couple businesses on here. I thought it was a pretty good show, and one of the businesses was actually one of my mock Shark Tank clients from my Shark Tank Insider list. So I was super nervous, almost like I was going on the show because I had met with them, I had talked to them, we had done a mock Shark Tank, and there they were on TV. So I want to talk about that as well. First, Foot Cardigan. What are your thoughts? Have you already signed up? You've had
No, I actually I don't wear socks most 90% of the time. So I'm not the best one for socks. I think these subscription based things are really good models if you can make them work. I mean, you get all these followers that pay a monthly fee, and the subscription based um, themes seem to be working well when you can find a little niche market that seems to work like it sounds like they're doing. So I go into every episode with kind of open eyes and open arms, and kind of I want to hear the story, because it's always more than you see initially. And the 6,000 people paying $9.95 a month, you have no say of what you get, I guess. So that's kind of the downside, but obviously they're doing something right. They're growing their business. It's a unique thing. It's kind of like the guy that started the mail-in razors. You buy razors and you get them through the mail and you throw them away, and the guy's doing $1 billion a year now. So it's crazy.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the takeaway from this for me was a subscription-based model. And we'll skip the chit chat. Go to the very end. Troy Carter and Mark Cuban were talking about it, and they said these guys could get a $10 million valuation tomorrow. Well, they just did a deal for $250,000 for 20%. So they're at $1.25, right? And they're saying $10 million tomorrow. And it's not the socks. I'm not a sock guy either. I would go for an underwear cardigan maybe, where they send me one every month. But socks, no, it's all about the platform, the subscriber base, and the fact that they have regular paying customers. The product at that point doesn't matter. And I think people need to understand that, because I have some friends who are watching, and we think this whole sock thing is actually kind of weird. Like, most of our single friends that are business professionals are really into, like, they wear pants that don't fit so that people can see their socks. And so we make fun of them for that. So I wasn't surprised to see these guys on here, but you get the beards and the socks. It's kind of, that's the man trend at the moment. Are you seeing that in Peoria, or is it just here where I live?
No, it's where you guys live, the bigger cities. I always say Peoria is 2 to 5 years behind the rest of the times. So it's old school here. It's old money, and it's just pretty simple. So it usually takes Peoria a few years to catch up with the rest of the country, especially on new and innovative stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Troy said socks are a rocket ship right now, and the subscription business is key. I think he nailed it. That was a smart comment. And ultimately, if that deal went through, which I'm not sure if it did or not, but I'll do some research on that. I think they got great partners, but the Sharks gave it up at the end. There's a lot of valuation there, basically overnight, they could get as a subscription by the socks. Pretty much that's about it on this one. I mean, great model. The fact that, why have they been doing it for part-time so long? They've done 900,000 in sales. There's 4 partners.
Yeah, part-time. And that's one of the things that a lot of times the Sharks usually frown on is part-time people. But they obviously were committed because they both quit their jobs and went into this thing full-time. And I think that's what ultimately, perked the interest to begin with. So.
Yeah, I mean, they're expecting $1.5 million this year. You got a 7% conversion rate. These guys that are web developers and optimization experts, I know in my space with the platform building, they have a head start on everybody. If they know how to build their own websites and put in the sales funnels and watch the conversion rates, I mean, competing with someone who's brand new to it, there's just no competition at all. And that's an essential skill. You're pretty tech savvy. You know how to do that? You know how to get your conversion rate up past the 7% these guys are getting? Are you?
We monitor a lot of that stuff in-house big time. And yeah, we do. We really try to us, it's about getting people to the site and how many people actually open the shopping cart, check out versus abandoned shopping cart and all that stuff. So yeah, that's really crucial. As I say to everybody, numbers don't lie. And as the Sharks pointed out to me, obviously on season 4, I didn't know my numbers. And so that's one of the things that obviously I've taken their advice and gone back and I've do my due diligence on everything. And season 4 to season 6 was pretty proven. I dug deep and know my numbers. So yeah, so I'm a numbers freak.
You did. You made a transformation. You're going to come back on the podcast soon and talk about that and why you made Mark fall in love with you there live on the Shark Tank, how you pulled that off. But it was pretty cool to watch you just kind of nail those. You knocked him out of the park, really. Every single numbers question was like, bam, bam, bam.
I was ready. I was prepared. Like I said, obviously I never expected in a million years to get a second chance, but I can tell you as soon as I found out they wanted me to come back, there was no questions that I was not leaving any rocks unturned, man. I was coming in on fire, ready for anything they threw at me.
Excellent. Now, the last thing I want to talk about with the foot cardigan, they asked for $250,000 for 10%. They left with $250 for 20%. In a deal splitting Mark Cuban and Troy Carter. What I thought was interesting is Damon was obviously interested. He made it clear. He made some jokes about how they obviously wanted him to do the deal. And his first offer was 22.5. Kevin actually came in, but he wanted them to take distribution. And then ultimately Troy came in and made him a 15% offer. He undercut Damon by 7.5%. My first thought was, if you watch the PR and the media about Shark Tank, it's always that they're overinflated. Kevin O'Leary tonight mentioned, if you want me, you're going to have to pay extra. So I thought Troy was going to have real world valuations and start undercutting everybody, but that trend didn't hold till the end of the show because he really got a little greedy later. So as someone who's been on Shark Tank before we move to the next business, what were your general observations about being on the show? What gets left out, the anxiety of kind of like watching yourself on TV again versus how you felt you did when you were there and then seeing it live? Give us some insight on that.
Well, obviously you forget about some of the things you say, and the filming is far longer than what you see on television. And so, you just forget some of the questions, and you're watching yourself on television. It's like, oh gosh, yeah, I remember that now. So it kind of fades in and fades out because you're in the heat of the moment and you're so dialed into the questions and the sharks. I mean, the rest of the world kind of stands still for that, 40 to 90 minutes, whatever it is, you're in the tank there. And so, it's just like you turn the rest of the world out. You're forgetting some of the things that goes on in the heat of the battle in there as well. So, season 4, I was crazy nervous. I mean, I was so nervous I couldn't even see straight. Basically, season 6, I was not nervous whatsoever. I was just ready to go. So, so it's fun to watch yourself because obviously, us entrepreneurs, number one, as we all know, just because you film doesn't necessarily mean you even make the show. And so you're sitting there waiting in the dark to see if you even make the show. And so then when you do make the show, it's the first time you see it with the rest of the world. So it's not like you get any input or cut this, or I don't like that, or that's not right. It is what it is. And so you just hope for the best.
Yeah, actually, we're going to switch off now, but I got a little insight from my Shark Tank buddies here. Foot Cardigan just passed 50,000 in sales for the night. They're doing okay.
Good.
So a lot of people have the misconception that you sell a ton of product when you go on Shark Tank. Not necessarily the case. I think if you have a $100,000 night, $100,000 weekend, you're actually doing pretty good. Some people don't really sell much of anything, as you know.
Yeah, that's every business is different. I mean, there's several of us that stay in connection with each other pretty regularly. And then of course there's some Shark Tank groups and on Facebook and stuff. And so you kind of get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And, some of the people you think would go out there and crush it really don't do anything. And then you hear certain stories of people that might not have got a deal and still went out there and crushed it, kind of like we did on season 4. And even though, I was so concerned about our site not crashing, because you hear about everybody saying, oh my gosh, if you go on Shark Tank or Oprah, your site's going to crash. And Byron from Corduroy, who we filmed together season 4, he happened to air 2 weeks before me on season 4, and his site went down like instantly. So my main focus was my site's not going to crash. In hindsight, I wish my site would have crashed because we ended up getting so much traffic due to the sharks' comments of this is just incredible food, incredible product. Oh, I love this sausage. I mean, Robert, the cold cuts. Kevin, this is incredible. We had 87,000 on our site within like 3 minutes, and we sustained it. We didn't crash, but we had so much business. I think I shared this with you before, TJ, that we shipped $100,000 twice. We only got paid for once due to a software glitch. Yep. So we had some serious growing pains that, some people, new people that hadn't been in business for 18 years or 16 years, whatever it is, like I have, that could have put them out. I mean, you could have been done one and done right then and there. And so we were fortunate that we survived that.
I remember you telling me about that and holding back the tear and much that flushing that 100K down the drain.
Oh my goodness. Still painful to talk about it.
Yeah. Good times. And Dave has done very well. His airing. I know you sold meat to all the sharks. I'm guessing Barbara's the one who loves the sausage. Am I wrong on that?
No, it was Robert. Barbara has not ordered from us directly, but I've actually sent Barbara stuff, and she's tweeted about it. So you know what? That's great. Several of them do order on a regular basis, and but they all definitely eat it, whether it's coming from me or some gift from the others or whatever the case might be. They all have had our product multiple times. I will tell you that.
All right, next up in the tank, Shark Tank Hangover. Let's talk about Valpark Mobile. Hopefully everybody can see that. I can't tell if it's centered or not. Valpark Mobile. It's kind of interesting. We've got another subscription-based company, but they're using a mobile app to deliver their products. So I'm kind of seeing a trend here, right? Regularly and evaluation. How do you continue to scale? What I thought was interesting with this one was the comparison to Uber. Wayne Johnson, obviously a smart guy, also a web developer, built the whole thing himself. He's a hustler. He believes he has the same essential building blocks in the foundation as Uber did, and they kind of set him straight on this. What were your initial reactions to this presentation?
Well, my initial reaction is it's two completely different platforms. Number one is Uber is similar to a cab. Everybody that's in the big cities uses cabs, or you go to Las Vegas, you go to any of these big cities, 80% of everybody in the big cities uses a cab. Not 80% of everybody valet parks, because it's a significant higher ticket item, and it's more of a luxury than everybody, I guess a norm. And so that was my first thing is okay, this is a selective group, number one, that's going to valet park. Yes, there's still a big market for it, but is it something that is sustainable to the equivalence of Uber? My personal opinion, I don't think so. I mean, I don't valet park unless I'm in a city that's so busy that I just want to get in and get out type thing. And so it's not an everyday thing for even most of the common Americans. It sure as heck isn't me. So I don't know. I don't know enough about it, to be honest with you. I mean, again, Uber just got into Peoria probably 4 months ago. So as I said, Peoria is always behind. They have there's probably, I don't even know if there's any places in Peoria that valet park. There's a couple of hotels, I guess there is.
You're in Illinois. So did the politicians and the lobbyists keep Uber out, or they just now arrived organically into it?
No, it had to go through the politicians and the bureaucrats, and it went through city council, and of course they had to vote on it and all that stuff. And it took some go rounds to get it through, and it's finally through.
So I'll tell you about how I feel with Uber. Uber actually has changed my mind about whether or not I need a car when I travel. So when I travel and Uber's available, I don't need a car anymore, which kind of makes your point about when to valet versus when to use Uber. And I love Uber. This service, on the other end, you're right, I don't valet that often either. If you're going to a basketball game, you're going to a hotel, you're going out to a nice dinner, that's about it. Maybe I'm just not like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, but the valet experience is much, much less frequent than Uber for me. And I think they hit it, I think it was Troy hit it right on the head. Let me check my notes and make sure that was him when he talked about Uber going after the entire ecosystem and Wayne being way too niched. I think it's true. I mean, if it took him this long to get to 115 locations and he's making 28,000, he's a long way from having a company that nets $1 million in his pocket. And it's got a lot of different ways.
Yeah. So that pitch tonight didn't wow me or get me super excited like some of the other ones, that's for sure, even though it is a subscription based. I just don't. I think he's got an uphill battle.
And I think I bolded the best comment I liked of the night, and it was also Troy when he said, "You aren't paranoid enough for me." Right at the end, I want a founder who's paranoid that people are going to crush him at any given moment. You've been a really successful CEO. What do you think? True or not true? Overconfidence or paranoia?
I always am skeptical and paranoid. You know what I mean? It takes years and years and years to build a business, no matter what it is, unless you happen to get lucky and hit it right out of the park starting off. But if you screw up once, man, it can come tumbling down overnight. So you need to always be paranoid, always be on your game. No matter what is in my world, being in the food business, I mean, we got to be extra cautious just on food safety, so we're always cautious. And to me, paranoid is good because that means you're always on high alert.
Did we talk about the guest sharks during the session, or was that pregame? Because I think this is the segment where we found out that Mark turned down the investment in Uber. Well, everyone that was an early investor in Uber is a big shot now. Chris Sacca's coming on later. Uber's his bread and butter. You got Troy Carter, Ashton Kutcher. I mean, you look at the names Uber, Spotify, and Chris Sacca's whole portfolio. It's like if you invested in these, you pretty much couldn't lose. I mean, there's Twitter, there's a couple others I can't think of off the top of my head. If you have the money to throw at them, you can be an amazing A-tier investor. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you got to have money to burn, or money to play, or money to gamble, however you want to look at it. And a lot of people do. Most people don't. Just like the valet parking thing. I mean, it takes a gutsy person to see something like that and really see the vision and truly believe in that in 3 years, 5 years, this is going to be a grand slam out of the park. Similar to Uber. I mean, you talk to a lot of people about that. Nobody would have ever thought it would have flown. Mark's commented that they would never get it through the taxi regulations and all that stuff. But you know what? If there's a will, there's a way, and there's a desire. It just takes time. And so, if you're willing to put your money and forget about it for a couple of years before you get a return on investment, like the Sharks, they want to return quick. But some things, for the big payoffs, you might have to sit and wait a few years. And if you're in it for the long haul and you don't need the money, it can be kind of just sitting on the sidelines. You can really hit a fat cat, certain times.
Before we move to the next company, we had a cool update. The Mr. Wonderful's platform of love, Wonderful Weddings. Just made me wish I was in Nantucket with them. Funny story, I actually had this company, Bottle Breacher, on the podcast about a week ago, and they knew their update was coming up. So they did a couple really cool things. One, I got my t-shirt.
Whoa. Very cool.
I got to talk to Eli and Jen, and they hooked me up with my very own podcast, Bottle Breacher. These things are pretty dang cool. I'll have to have them send one over to you, Dave.
Well, they did. Actually, we sponsored a NASCAR last month, and from Mark Cuban companies, of course, because Bottle Breacher is Mark and Kevin. And so Abe's like, oh, you got to send Tommy Baldwin racing one of the Bottle Breachers. So Eli, he did send me a Bottle Breacher with Tommy Baldwin racing. And so obviously in return, I sent him a box of goodies because I wanted him to eat my stuff as well. So it was really cool. And then to hear their update tonight that they've done $4.5 million in 7 months or whatever it is crazy.
Nuts. And they were really kind of coy about it. When I asked them, like, well, we didn't know we were going to talk about sales today. I'm like, well, we are. Let's hear it. They're like, well, it's, I don't know, somewhere close to 5 million.
Yeah. Good for them, man. They created a little niche, and you know what? I'm tickled to death for them.
This is the guy who, when he bought his first laser engraver, had to sell his motorcycle because they want to worry about not having enough money to pay the rent. And after a short amount, I mean, they've just crushed it, knocked it out of the park. Hey, there's Clint Eastwood with one of his things right there. I can't touch. There it is. So let's talk about Two Guys Bow Ties. I got a little picture here for everyone to remember that one. Two Guys Bow Ties. Initial thoughts, Dave. Go.
Initial thoughts was quick fad. I didn't think it was maybe a really great product. My wife thought it was really cool. It's different and unique. And if, like they, as they defined it more and you want to stand out and be different and more have a talk of, a conversation piece, obviously something like that's going to do it. I think they presented themselves very well. Did they end up going with Damon, or who'd they go with tonight?
They ended up going with Damon, but they took the long route there. Very interesting negotiation.
I think in their field, they couldn't have picked a better shark if they, had the opportunity, because I think Damon, when it comes into the fashion and the clothing world, will be the guy that can open up doors. So I think they got what they want. A lot of these entrepreneurs, obviously now I've, been around the show for 3 years, so I kind of know, but these guys, what they can do, I mean, as you know me, TJ, very well, to me, it's never been about the money. It's always been about the relationships and who can open the doors and connect the dots. And I knew as soon as I had a second opportunity that if there was any way I could land Mark Cuban, that was the guy I wanted, period. I didn't care, because I knew in my world, he believed in our product and he could truly open the doors. And so that's kind of the same scenario that I look at these guys with Damon. If they play their cards right and listen and don't think they know it all, I think they'll end up knocking it out of the park with Damon.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm not sure that it was unclear from watching it if Damon was really their first choice. It seemed like they were leaning towards Mark, and Mark kind of took an early exit. They made the joke about his head being too big to fit in the hat, which I thought was really funny. And then he said, well, the hats aren't big enough to hold my brains and I'm out. And so here's what happened. Let's run through it. The bow tie costs $7.50. They sell retail between $45 and $95. Not bad.
Great margins, yeah.
Because I honestly, when he said we're not really selling them yet, I figured they had just launched. Shark Tank found them on Kickstarter. It's all pre-revenue. Then they shocked us and said, we've done about $1 million over the last 2.5 years. A little surprised to hear that, I'll be honest, but I think it is a really high quality product. When they showed close up, you can see why people would pay $100 for these things if that's what they're into. Again, like the beards and the socks, I'm not a bow tie guy, but I respect, that a lot of people really, really dig the product.
Yeah, and they did their homework, more importantly. Again, on season 4, I got hammered. I didn't know my numbers. I didn't know what I should know. And they came in prepared. And so, that's the biggest thing about Shark Tank today is if you come in unprepared, these sharks are going to eat you alive. And so the more prepared or over-prepared you can be, which they were, the better opportunity you're going to have to close a deal.
So here's where it got really interesting is the negotiation. 150,000 for 10%. So not a huge investment. We talked earlier about having money to burn. I mean, I don't know what Mark Cuban's salary is for the show, but I know when they offered him 50,000, he laughed at it and said, "You know who I am." So let's assume it's 150. He's playing with house money to invest in these companies. It's really about his time. But this is when Mr. Wonderful talked about his platform of love, and he used that to sell this opportunity for them to come in and join that platform and be part of his loving family, and also to get in the special events business. Which actually, we should talk about your company, what you're doing with Wicked Good Cupcakes. I mean, this is kind of your sandbox now.
Is that?
And Kevin, for the second week in a row, said 150,000 for 15% straight equity. And he really wanted in. I mean, he gave them basically what they asked for, which you don't see from Mr. Wonderful that often. Damon John jumped in knowing that they probably were interested in him, and he added a 5% premium. He's at a straight 20%. Mark goes out. Lori goes out. Lori was kind of a spectator tonight, honestly. And then after Troy, who was the first one, goes out, they turned to Troy and said, "Hey, we really think there's an opportunity for you to make something great happen here. Are you interested in coming back in?" And I thought that was crazy. He had already gone out. He's got an offer from Kevin, and they turned to Troy, who said, "Well, it's going to take more equity. I want 30%. So what did they do? You remember this? They turned to Damon and Troy and said, "Here's what we can do. Too much equity. We'll give you 20% equity. We'll cap it there, plus a 5% royalty till your investment's paid back." And I thought, here, Kevin gave him an equity offer, and they're throwing a royalty deal back at the guy sitting next to Kevin. I was spinning. I was laughing hysterically. Did you catch that?
Oh, absolutely. I caught that. You bet. I thought the same thing. I thought, they're giving away too much at that point. Here they're kind of going in the wrong direction.
I agree, but they're giving Kevin's offer to the guy sitting next to Kevin. I would have loved to have been inside his head right then.
Oh, so, or could you imagine what was said that wasn't shown?
Oh, it must have been great. I'm sure there were one-liners. But Kevin, instead of doing the Mr. Wonderful thing, he turned back into Bruce Banner, and he drops his offer to 150,000 for 10% with a 7.5% royalty. Like, he's getting beat at his own game, and that's till it's the investment's paid back. And eventually, Damon John. So hold on. So stop right there. They counter to 20% to Damon. Troy goes out. Damon ends up making the deal at 17.5%, which I thought was interesting. Is they went from 20 to 17.5, and Damon says, "You really think I'm going to argue over 2.5%?" On Shark Tank, usually the answer is always yes. The Sharks are in the budge, and Damon took it. He said deal. I was kind of surprised.
Well, I think Damon is very smart. Let's face it. Damon is a genius at branding and marketing clothing products, especially. That's his wheelhouse. And I think he saw an opportunity, and he's probably already, I'm sure there's been other people that have already approached him, or this idea of these fancier wood type bow ties. So obviously I don't think this was the first time Damon's ever seen this. And so he probably already knows right now what he can do with that product and where he can go and what markets he can open up. So kudos to him.
Yeah. And he took the 2.5% equity discount, but he got a 10% royalty until the investment paid back. So it worked out really good for him. And he said during the proof segment all the way back in season 4 that wood is super hot right now. And I see it everywhere I go. And these guys obviously at their top of their game. So I expect this. I don't know if the deal is going through. I'm pretty sure that the Cardigan deal didn't, but if this one does, either way, I think these guys are well on their way to having a successful deal. So be interested to talk to them later.
Yeah, and you can always go to markcubancompanies.com, and that has a list of all of his companies on there too. So if it's closed, as soon as it's closed, even I think a lot of times before they even air, they're on his site. And so that's one way to see if it's a deal with Mark that I know how where his stuff's at.
We should actually take a look at that right now and see.
There you go.
So last one was Mark Cuban. Robert's doing this now too. Robert copied Mark. He puts all of his companies on his homepage there. Echo Valley Meats. Looks nice. There's so many companies on here. It'll take me a half hour to find this. But
you know what? The last ones that closed start from the top, because I closed and Illuminate closed behind me, and they're above me. So they would this company would have been above us, so that as the newer ones come on, they get the top and we get pushed down. So
yep, there's only 2 companies before Illuminate, and they're Node and Sriracha to Go. So no dice. But let's talk about the last one. Special place in my heart for the Nerdwax family, and I'll tell you why. I offered my insiders to do a mock Shark Tank to help them prepare, and Nerdwax was on the list. So we actually went through all the stripes, And I talked to them recently before they went on, and they were terrified, like super nervous about the airing. And it's funny that, and you can relate with this, what they were most scared about up until 2 weeks before they find out that they're going to air is whether or not it's going to amount to anything, because they don't know if they're going on TV. And then they get the call and they just punch it into overdrive. You can relate, right?
Oh, I can relate totally. Yeah.
They don't know how much inventory to buy. I know I just had an update with Sleeping Baby. They said they had 9 months inventory in stock. That was 1 week. So I talked to Nerdwax. I'm like, how much you got in stock? They're like, well, if we have a really good weekend, then we should be able to stock everyone and get more stock back in within a week. And he just was texting me earlier. Looks like they might do $100,000 this weekend. So I'm pretty stoked for him. I couldn't be happier. And the edit was really good. What were your thoughts on the product?
You know what? I think it's a specialized market, especially for people that wear glasses or work outside and sweat or do any kind of athletics. And you know what? Kudos to them. It looks like they found a little niche product that works. The one thing I did catch is when they told them when they opened the cap, to kind of rub it on sideways. So my first thought was they need to get more of a tapered bottle so it's easier to put the application onto the glasses. That's just one little thing that I heard and caught right away. You want to make it what I always say, dummy proof and very simple to use. And it looked more like a chapstick type of container. And I just didn't understand when he said use the side, to apply it. And so as long as it works, I don't wear glasses, so other than sunglasses, so I would have no use for it. But if it works, I definitely think that people will buy it, because let's face it, if your glasses are sliding or you're sweating or anything, it's a pain in the butt, I'm sure.
Oh, it is. It is for sure. And it's funny because when we talked about all the different scenarios before they actually filmed, when I talked to him today, I said, you must have just lit up when you saw Troy there with those giant clunky glasses hanging off of his chin, because that's the money pit right there.
All right.
He laughed, but he said Troy wasn't very interested and making a deal happen at the numbers they wanted. So I thought it was interesting that they closed the show. Maybe it's because there was so many offers and so many deals being made before him. They closed it out with someone who didn't take a deal. And the offers they got were all kind of steep. And then at the end of the show, they walked out and you got Mark and Damon clapping and the other guys saying, you're dead to me. Get out of here. Don't come back. I thought it was a pretty interesting segment.
Yeah, it is. And let's face it, there's a lot of jib-jabbing going back and forth between the Sharks too. You know what I mean? They're as competitive as anybody on earth, just like the rest of us. And so if they don't get the deal, some of them, don't want to see the other one get it. And sometimes they're happy, sometimes they're not. Sometimes, as we know, there's major arguments. There's all kinds of stuff that happens between the Sharks.
So they come in, Dawn, his wife, and the 2 kids are there. In my book, I talk about how if you want to film early in the day and have come in and out, bring kids or dogs or anything that'll pee on set, because that way they can't make you sit there all day long, which we got a good laugh at. But the kids looked fantastic. They did $136,000 in sales, and $65K of that was profit. I didn't think it was any surprise that later, when these guys were making their offers, you had Troy and you had Kevin basically offering venture debt or a loan where they're going to pay back 200, 300% interest, essentially about what their profit margins, just for a partner. I think that's a terrible, terrible deal for them to take. What were your thoughts?
I guess you have to look at that in multiple ways. The first thing my wife said sitting here watching is, well, why wouldn't they just go to a bank and get the money? Well, number one, if they don't have equity or good credit, they might not be able to go to a bank. So that would be your choice number one. Obviously, you're going to pay a lot more getting it from a VC or a shark than your money. You can get money anywhere else. So you have to look at the big picture. Is it really worth it? Is it worth going into business with a shark to pay 3 times your money? Maybe yes, maybe no. If it was me and I was going to take their money knowing I had to pay them triple, I would put in a contract. What exactly are you going to do for me to help me open the doors or connect the dots? Right. And that would have been one thing I would have said is, yeah, I'm interested, but are you going to guarantee that you're going to make certain phone calls or help me as needed? I'm not going to lean on you unless I absolutely need to, but if I am, are you there for me? And so that's some of the stuff that if they're willing to do that, then it's probably it's still a good move, believe it or not. People might think I'm crazy, but then at the end of the day, they didn't give up any equity. They paid a shark to connect a lot of dots and open up doors that, most humans can never open on their own. So you have to look at it from a different perspective. I look at the big picture, and, I was offered a lot more money than I did a deal with Mark on season 6, but to me, it was never about the money. You know me, TJ, I've never chased the money. I want the best product and the best customer service, and I believe everything else will happen organically. And so that's just how I run my company.
Yeah, and you've confided in me that you made the right decision a million times over. I mean, I know what Mark has brought to your business, and I think you're very fortunate. Some people
Yep.
haven't been as lucky or as the execution you've had. That's great.
I was in Dallas last week with Mark, me and Luminade and Monkey Matt and the bike guys that are in partners with Mark and Barbara. So Mark had a big speaking engagement.
Kazam or Villy? Which one?
Yeah.
Which bike?
Say the two names again.
Kazam is the baby bike, and then Villy Customs is
Villy Customs, yeah, and they're just killing it too. And so Mark had a big speaking engagement. So 4 or 5 of us all came in there, and it was really cool to hang out with everybody. And then I went back with me and Andrea from Luminade went back to Mark Cuban's office and hung out with Abe for a while that afternoon and kind of did some different things. And we just had a great time. And it's cool because I knew the Luminade girls. We actually filmed together on season 6, so we became friends all along. And I've they're in Chicago. I'm in Peoria, so we actually stay in touch all the time. I just was at an event in Chicago 2 days ago and ran into Anna as well. So we see each other quite often.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I want to get back to the clapping. Damon, when they came in, said, look, what were his exact words? It's too early. You don't need the investment. I beg you, do not take the money right now. And then at the end, Mark Cuban said, you control your own destiny. Things go where you don't expect when you try to explode. You're profitable, you don't have any debt, et cetera, et cetera. And they kind of wanted to just take what they'd learned in the tank and go out and make things happen. Whereas Lori and Kevin wanted to change the packaging, make it smaller, lower the price to get higher volumes. And it's interesting. I'd like to actually talk to Don about what their strategy was. I knew from chatting with them before, they had major packaging issues. They started out with a chapstick competitor for the tubes. And like you, with your $100,000 loss, everything they made didn't work. So they did this Kickstarter platform. They sold and buy it twice, and even the second time they still had failure because the different formula wasn't designed to work in that tube. And you would just think, well, it's kind of like chapstick and it's a chapstick tube, it'll just come out. Didn't work that way. Didn't work at all. So they had to scrap all of it and start over. And they looked at doing some tapered designs and some draft angles, and that was one of their biggest issues. So when I heard him say, make the packaging smaller, turn it into Blistex squeegee, I'm like, they're not going to do that.
You know what the first thing I would do is you got to see firsthand what an absolute top quality company Maui Gyms is like. I would go to a company like that and said, look, we got something that's going to fit with your sports line really well. We're going to sell it to you really cheap, even though we're going to make money off you because your distribution and your network promoting it with your glasses and especially all your athletes that are using it, it just opens up a channel to them overnight type of thing.
You know what? That's a perfect idea. Why didn't I think of that? You're the genius.
Well, my mind never stopped. You know,
it's true. Vampire doesn't even sleep. We should, yeah. I think. Well, I love Mike. That was the coolest company tour I've ever been on. I haven't really talked much about that on the show, but I should. I'd like to have him on to talk about it. That company is a machine. It's like watching Terminator when you go forward in the future, except with all of the killing. I mean, everything they do is perfectly structured, organized, and manicured. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, they are a global company, and it's unbelievable. You know, and it's so funny when you hear people say, well, I've never even heard of Maui Gyms. And next thing you know, you tell them about Maui Gyms, and then you see me a year later, you're like, man, you introduced me to this Maui Gyms. And I see them during the NHL playoff games now. I see them here. I see them there. I mean, Maui Gyms is growing. They're actually hiring 100 new employees right now in Peoria simultaneously. So, you know, that company's growing leaps and bounds.
That says it because he said they're going to do marketing for the first time in their history and start kind of blitzing nationwide.
Exactly. Yeah, it cost them during the Stanley Cup playoffs $300,000 for a 30-second commercial, and you know that's like peanuts to them. And obviously, their model works no matter what they're spending on their advertising budget because their sales are growing. When you're hiring 100 employees at once, I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care if you're Caterpillar, things are going right.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's probably going to be all the people from Caterpillar that get jobs there.
Oh, tell me about it. That's not good here right now. 10,000 people.
Yeah. See what happens when you tell them you don't like Obamacare. Ooh, just kidding. All right. So Kevin had the best line of this segment when he said, I am a marketing genius. He must have been if he thought that they were going to give him a 10% royalty and 3 times the return on his investment plus a 3% equity stake. I mean, it as early on as they are in the company, I think they've got nowhere to go but up. So I was really proud of Don. I thought he did really well. He said he stammered too much at the beginning, but it's funny because anytime you see yourself on TV, don't you kind of just hate it? Do you cringe when you watch yourself on TV? I know I do. Can't stand
No, I don't. You know what? I don't. But you know what, TJ, you know me. I speak all over the country, and so I don't use notes. I don't use cue cards. There was actually a Shark Tank panel in Chicago last weekend for a big funding conference, and there was 4 or 5 of us there. They want to send me the questions. I don't need them. You know what? I mean, just shoot from the hip, be confident, don't be cocky, try to, know what you're talking about, or just admit you don't know what you're talking about, and so that's how I've always been. And it seems to work for me anyway.
Well, Dave, that's it. We went through everybody. I can't wait to have you on the podcast again. I think people are going to be stoked to hear like how amazing things have been for your company. We still have 1 brisket left in the freezer, so I need to make a YouTube video me eating that, because everything I've had from you has been like amazing, and I'm very grateful for all the stuff.
Well, I'll have to mail you our new corporate catalog too. So we're getting into the incentive world, and you alluded to earlier that I brought Wicked Good Cupcakes into the mix. So Wicked Good Cupcakes and I have formed an alliance. So now we have 2 great Shark Tank companies with 2 sharks involved, and we're getting into the corporate incentive world. And so we just got the catalog in hand last week, and our first email that went back and forth to the designer was March 8th. So it's literally taking this long to get this corporate catalog. And in the last week, I've been in Dallas, I've been in Tahoe, I've been in Reno, and I've been in Chicago. So I have been moving around big time because there's so many opportunities. What I find crazy about the incentive world is there's a lot of companies that have to spend let's say $100 million on incentives, whether it's American Airlines or Citibank. So the thing that blew me away about this was at the conference, there's 6 watch companies, Quartz, Seiko, Movado, Bulova, whatever. There's 1 meat company in that world, Omaha Steaks. Right. So there's so much opportunity. I'm just having fun.
And about that deal, how come there aren't more Shark Tank companies collaborating? I was on the phone with one the other day and thought, how come you and XYZ are not partnering up? Dave Alwan's doing it. Look what they're up to. And they kind of go, I don't know. Maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah, and they should, because you know what? So many people are so self-centered, and so much all they care about is themselves. They're not looking at the big picture. And it's like 4 eyes are better than 2, or 6 heads are better than 3. You start collaborating with the right people, and you surround yourself with other great companies and other great entrepreneurs. Only good things can come out of it. And I think everybody's like, well, I'm not giving them a piece of my action, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that. It's kind of like the first few seasons of Shark Tank. I can't tell you how many people said to me they're not going to try out because, quote, they're not giving ABC 5% equity. So first of all, I laugh and I say, oh, so you already know you're first of all, you made the cut, you aired, you knocked it out of the park. They let America know who you are, but you're not giving up 5%. So that's the reason you're not going to audition. And I just think that's hysterical.
I don't know what psychology calls when you're younger and you don't want to get rejected by the hot chicks. You go, I would never date her anyway. She's got huge thighs.
That's so funny. So funny.
So before we go, talk about working with Mark Cuban. Obviously, I've talked to you about having him on the show, and I'm just too much of a chicken to reach out to him. But I've talked to Abe. He's a really nice guy, obviously very talented. But, talk to us about the interaction with you and Mark and how he influences your business. Because I'm looking at the website right now. I should flip the camera and show you. Yeah, I'll do that. Here's his forever. Like, there's like 10 pages of these things.
Yeah.
And you're in the mix. So how does he stay on top of all this? How's that work?
Well, you know what? People always ask me, how do I respond back or take every phone call a day? And, I'm 600 to 800 emails a day and probably 200 text messages a day. So I'm anywhere from, let's say, 700 to 1,000 messages a day. And I can email Mark and get a response back usually within 15 to 60 minutes. And if a guy like that can take the time to respond back to me or any one of his other companies, how in the heck can I be too busy for anybody in my world? Mark is absolutely top-notch. His family's top-notch. His company's top-notch. Everybody that he puts in front of you or gives you the opportunity to work with, whether it's accounting or marketing or whatever the case might be, they're just a well-oiled machine, man. I mean, he is all business, and believe it or not, as you said, whatever he gets paid for the show, it's free money. It's free money, but it's still his money. And let me tell you something, he takes his money very serious. And that's why he's so successful, to be quite honest with you, because, he wants reports weekly, bi-weekly, when you're sending checks. He wants to know everything. And he's on top of his game. Don't think he's not paying attention. He's always paying attention.
Yeah, I know it. And when I have him on, I do want to ask him about his family. How do you're hitting it at that level as a billionaire. I don't read a lot. When I read about Mark Cuban this and Mark Cuban said that, Mark Cuban SEC, I want to talk about how he manages the family life, because he's got being pulled in so many directions. I know that's one of my big challenges. One of your challenges, you have a lot of things going on with your family that we're not going to talk about tonight. But that's something that always interests me, and I can't seem to find that information out there being public.
Well, I can tell you this: his wife is absolutely top notch. I deal with several of his family members on a personal level, and his sister-in-law, Tiffany's sister Jamie, is absolutely world class. Also, I mean, she just oozes class, and so I have no doubt everybody that in his family is like that, and he surrounded himself with great people too, whether it's his employees or his family. And so he found a great wife, and I'm sure his kids are phenomenal. And it's everything about him just oozes class as far as I'm concerned.
Well, speaking of class, Dave, thank you for this. Thank you for taking the time out. I know it's past midnight and you're about to turn into a pumpkin. You're already dressed in orange as it is. I certainly appreciate you sharing your insight, and I look forward to having you on the podcast real soon. So thanks again for joining us.
You, TJ, my friend, are the only one that I would do this for at midnight when I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So So my all right, and we'll get the podcast scheduled here before long too, because that'll be fun as well. Like you said, I'm sure the viewers would like to see kind of what's happening. Our quote, Dave Alwan's so lucky. I'm not sure it's luck, but I did get a break, and I would say getting back on the show was luck because that had nothing to do with me. So that was a break. But as far as becoming successful, I'm not sure that's luck. I've taken my ass kickings along the way.
Yeah, luck's not the right word, but by strictly comparison, you're certainly a lucky guy. So
exactly.
And anyway, thank you again. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks for joining the Hangover.
Cheers.